Fall had arrived, and the forest had that quiet magic that only mid-October can bring. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and damp leaves, while the sun dipped early behind the ridge. I'd packed my usual solo camping kit: tent, stove, cooler, folding chair, headlamp, extra batteries, and my trusty Mora knife, bright orange handle, impossible to miss in leaf litter. I wasn't seeking adventure, just a weekend of peace in the woods. The clearing I'd chosen months ago was perfect. Flat, about a mile down a rutted forest road, with a fire ring that someone had left years before. It wasn't hidden, but it felt private. The kind of place where you could sit for hours and feel like the forest belonged to you. I set up my tent quickly, tied the bear bag high, stacked firewood, and arranged my stove and cooler on the tailgate. The blues guitar on my old AM/FM radio cut through the quiet as I fried a ribeye, letting the smell mingle with the smoky autumn air. Then I heard laughter, faint, weaving through the trees. Two beams of light bobbed between trunks. A couple stepped into the firelight. She wore a beanie and puffy jacket, sipping a steaming mug. He had a neatly trimmed beard and a fleece patched with a park emblem. Friendly, they introduced themselves as Jake and Alana, pointing toward a blue tent barely visible through the underbrush. At first, it was just normal camp talk. Trails, overlooks, tips for hiking. They were charming, almost too charming. But there was something in the way Jake's headlamp kept glancing at my gear. Not curious, evaluative. When I excused myself to grab something from the truck, I returned to find my knife missing. That knife never walked off. I checked everywhere: fire ring, chair, ground, nothing. Alana laughed it off. Jake crouched and shuffled bark, but I let it slide, though my gut screamed otherwise. Later that night, I lay in my tent, sleep coming in fits. Then I heard it. A stick snapping just outside. The zipper on my tent creaked open a few inches. In the dim light, a shadow crouched, my knife glinting. "You should have come with us," whispered a voice. I froze, pretending to sleep, while inching my hand toward my phone. The shadow lingered, then retreated. My heart raced for hours. By dawn, the couple had vanished. No tents, no trash, no fire, just faint impressions in the grass. I hiked straight to the ranger station, shaken. The knife, the presence, the glint hovering near my face. They stayed with me long after I left. I never returned to that spot. I had spent most of my life behind screens. Servers, routers, IT contracts. But the woods were my refuge. When my son Ben turned 8, I promised him a proper camping trip. Not a tourist trap with paddle boats and boardwalks, but a quiet stretch of Lake George wilderness where the signs were weathered and the forest felt alive. We hiked a few miles, his little legs moving steadily, stopping often to poke at mushrooms, watch the brook, or ask endless questions about the universe. By late afternoon, we found a flat clearing, perfect for a tent, with a fire ring and a log, just right for sitting. The brook gurgled nearby, sunlight dancing across it. Setting up with an 8-year-old was slower than usual. He staked corners, tested the headlamp, until I had to remind him to save batteries, and declared the bear bag a pantry on a rope. Dinner was simple: mac and cheese and roasted hot dogs. We intentionally burned one marshmallow, tradition. The night descended into that deep Adirondack stillness, where sound carries far but nothing makes it. After Ben fell asleep, I lay in the tent, listening to the brook, the wind, the occasional snapping branch, when I noticed movement. At first, I thought it was wildlife. But then, I saw a man sitting on the log. Older, maybe 60, wearing a wool cap and jacket that might once have been part of a suit. Clean face. No pack, no flashlight, no tent, nothing that explained why he was there. He smiled. Not wide, not threatening, just calm. My first thought was alarm. My next was caution. I whispered a quiet, "Morning," and he replied simply, "I just wanted to see what kind of people would sleep with their backs to the trail." Then he stood, brushed his pants, and walked uphill into the trees. No hesitation, no glance back, vanishing as if swallowed by the forest. I stayed frozen until birds began calling. Ben stirred, asking if it was pancake time. I told him a half-truth. Just a hiker passing through. The rest of the morning was quiet, but I kept scanning the trail, the log, the edges of the clearing. That single encounter had unsettled me in a way no solo trip ever had. Even as we hiked back and returned home, I kept thinking of the man. How he appeared without warning, how silent he was, how exactly he seemed to know where he could be seen. That night, sleep was fractured. Every creak in the house, every shadow outside the window felt like him pacing silently, watching. I never saw him again, but I still angled my tent differently. Door facing the trail, not away. Silly, maybe, but necessary. There's a strange rhythm in the woods, a way of measuring trust and vigilance. And that man, sitting quietly at dawn, reminded me that sometimes being watched isn't about danger. It's about control, awareness, and the silent lessons the forest teaches. I had just turned 39 that September, and like most years, decided to celebrate quietly, alone on the trail. Hiking was my reset button. Work had drained me. Endless emails, screens, deadlines. I packed my gear for Mount Rogers in Virginia, a remote section of the Appalachians. No summits, no marathon hikes, just solitude, spruce forests, streams, and a small clearing I'd marked on my map. I arrived late afternoon. The gravel pull-off was empty, save for a faded sign pointing into the woods. The trail led through open grass first, then into dense spruce. The soft needle-covered ground muffled every step. By dusk, I reached the stream I'd scouted and pitched my tent on flat, sheltered ground. I strung my food bag, collected wood, and built a small fire. Dinner was instant noodles, a comfort I always craved after a hike. The forest had its usual rhythm: gurgling water, birds calling, wind rustling leaves. Around 11:30 p.m., I awoke to faint noises. At first, it was just the forest, but then footsteps, careful, deliberate, human. I froze, listening. The steps circled the campsite, staying just beyond the firelight. No voices, no flashlight, no packs. My heart raced. I knew enough to recognize the difference between accidental hikers and someone deliberately tracking your space. I lay still, hand on my boots, planning my next move. The footsteps stopped. Silence settled, thick and heavy. Then came the faint, metallic rasp of a zipper. The sound of my tent being slowly opened. Panic surged. I grabbed my phone with one hand, yanked the opposite zipper open, and peeked. A man stood just beyond the firelight, at the boundary where visibility faded into darkness. Average build, dark clothing, no pack, no light. He didn't speak, didn't move closer. He simply stood, perfectly positioned, observing. My pulse hammered. Time slowed. 20 seconds felt like an eternity. Then he stepped backward, slowly, deliberately, until darkness swallowed him. The forest seemed to reset itself. No more steps, no sounds, only the gentle murmur of the stream. Dawn revealed faint scuffs on the ground where he had stood. My campsite was untouched. Food bag hung, pot leaned against a rock, ashes cooled. Yet the evidence was subtle enough to make me question my sanity if I hadn't seen it. I packed quickly, tent half-staked, gear shoved into my pack. Every step down the trail felt watched. I kept glancing behind, expecting him to appear again. At the trailhead, the forest finally felt distant. My car was a lifeline. I drove straight to the nearest town, head pressed to the wheel, shaking. Weeks later, sleep was fractured. Any night, any faint sound could trigger memories of that shadow at the edge of firelight. I never saw him again. I left a note at the ranger station. Strange encounter. Man circling camp. No pack. Disappeared into woods. Please advise. No response. The encounter taught me to trust instinct. The forest is full of natural sounds, but human silence carries a different weight. It is intentional, aware, patient. The man never threatened, yet his presence communicated more than words. He wasn't lost. He wasn't curious for casual reasons. He was there to send a message, though I never understood it. Even now, when I hike or camp alone, I remain alert. The firelight's edge is sacred space, the boundary between safety and the unknown. That night reminded me, solitude is never complete, and the forest always has ears, eyes, and silent visitors. By October, I'd been camping alone for almost a year. I loved it. The independence, the quiet, the way the forest seemed to reset everything. That year, I chose the Ozark National Forest for a 3-night solo trip. No summits, no marathon hikes, just time to journal, hike slowly, and breathe. The trailhead was a simple dirt turnout with a faded wooden sign, almost swallowed by vines. The hike-in was beautiful. Mushrooms dotted the path, trees rolled out like a painted quilt, and streams glimmered under dappled light. By late afternoon, I found a flat clearing surrounded by oaks. An old stone fire circle suggested someone had camped here before, but it had been years, perfect for solitude. I pitched my tent, hung my food bag, and built a fire. The first night, just as the embers dimmed, I noticed movement down the trail. At first I thought deer, but 3 human figures emerged. A couple of men and a woman. They weren't close enough to make out details, just shadows moving carefully. I waved. Standard etiquette. They didn't wave back. They walked slightly off trail and set their packs down about 100 feet from my sight. I muttered, "Neighbors are," half amused, half irritated. No tents, no fire, just them, sitting silently in the dark. By nightfall, I lay in my tent, watching the glow from the dying fire. The trio was still there, motionless, silent. My unease grew. Morning revealed them sitting in the same positions. No fire, no stove, no movement. I called out casually, but only the woman turned her head slightly. Their presence was heavy, like a shadow pressing against the edges of reality. I busied myself with coffee, pretending it didn't bother me, but the silence clung to me. By the second night, the tension became unbearable. I cooked dinner, brushed my teeth, and zipped into my tent early. The forest had its rhythm. Owl calls, wind through branches, but I was hyper-aware. Every footstep, every crack of a branch sounded deliberate. I barely slept, convinced they were circling my camp, watching. By dawn, I decided to leave a day early. I packed quickly, stuffing gear, tent, and supplies into my pack. Halfway down the trail, I noticed movement out of the corner of my eye. The trio had stood and were walking in unison along the main trail, silent, without packs, without tents. Their footsteps echoed behind me, distant yet deliberate. A trail split appeared. I veered onto a rough side path, crouched among rocks, and waited. The trio passed the side path, one turning their head directly toward me. My lungs locked, heart racing. They continued, disappearing into the forest. Only then did I allow myself to move. Reaching the trailhead felt like a lifeline. My car looked like salvation. I drove straight to town, hands trembling on the wheel. At the ranger station, I reported what had happened. The ranger listened quietly, nodding, saying perhaps they were unusual hikers, but even he looked unsettled. Even now, I avoid camping near others. People can be noisy and irritating, but silence, intentional, heavy, human silence, can be far more unnerving. The memory of 3 figures, no fire, no light, just quiet, follows me. It reminds me that the woods, though beautiful and restorative, are never truly empty. Someone or something might always be watching.